Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of our Meaningful Monday live stream. So it's been a good weekend, I think, overall. Hope everyone's having a good start to their weeks. Happy Monday so far. My name is Drew Harrell, for those of you who don't know me. I'm here today to talk about something that's meaningful to me, at least in the past, and hopefully it's meaningful to you as well as you're going through and doing this. This is a relatively specific topic and it only apply to some of you, but the principles are going to be applicable much more widely in terms of team dynamics, in terms of organizational dynamics in general, and kind of the politics of um, the world of corporate kind of functions and organizations as a whole. So the topic tonight is why Agile is not working in your organization. And the whole idea behind this is I have a couple of clients who are technology folks, and Agile is a really, really effective method of project management and for team development, team management, except it's not really applied properly in most organizations that try to implement it. The thing is, when many organizations try to implement Agile, they try to do it in some kind of a weird, what I like to call fragile implementation, which is not really pure Agile. It's not really pure waterfall. It's something in between that doesn't work. And the struggle with this is that you have a half Agile team, you have a half waterfall team, you have people who are kind of coming together and trying to figure out what makes sense. And none of it makes sense. It doesn't actually function the way it's supposed to function. And then people take that and say that Agile is the problem. They'll just go back to waterfall and say, okay, we'll just do pure waterfall because that works and we know it works. Except it doesn't really work as well as people think it does. And the implementations of Agile are so flawed sometimes that you can't really test if it works or not. If you're trying to do it, you want to do it properly. And the whole idea of practice makes perfect is not applicable here because it's perfect practice makes perfect. If you're practicing Agile in a really inconsistent way, then it's not really going to work for you as well as you think it's going to work. And so naturally, you're not going to get the results you expect to get from an Agile implementation. There's all kinds of different versions of Agile, the different kind of spin-offs and things that work really well, like Scrum or SAFe, scaled Agile frameworks. But ultimately, I'm talking about the core of Agile principles and things that actually make sense as you're doing these kind of things. And we'll talk about some Scrum principles in the process of this as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is really that idea of those 2-week sprints and kind of breaking things up into digestible sections, so to speak, right? Time blocking, so to speak, within 2-week periods. 2 weeks is pretty much the Agile way of doing things. Now, I've seen 1-week sprints, I've seen month-long sprints, but 2 weeks is kind of your happy medium. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to implement Agile in a way that makes sense. So you're going to take on a certain amount of work for those 2 weeks. You're going to assess that work in the beginning. You're going to add the points and figure out how much capacity you have in your team to get that work done. And you're going to sign the work out. Now, in the very first sprint you're talking about, you're not going to be super accurate in your assessing of how difficult or how many points or however you want to choose to measure that amount of work. You're not going to be great at that in terms of measuring the amount of work versus your capacity. And that's okay. But the key is to pay attention to that and really do those retrospectives really, really closely. And then you'll be able to get an idea of that over time. You'll get much, much better in 6 months or even 3 months, frankly, the more you do it and the more you stick to those Agile principles. So you want to make sure you're sticking to your rituals. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Agile comes with it. With Agile comes with it certain rituals that you do to start sprints and to go off and check in every single day, which is like stand-up meetings to make sure everyone's getting work done, everyone has the support that they need. And then you finish with a sprint demo to show what you've done. And this is in software development, but you can implement it outside of software development as well. And you can kind of do a check-in at the end. And the last thing you want to do is what's called a retrospective. The retrospective is one of the key components of Agile. And you want to look at that in terms of as though it's a literally retrospective on the last sprint. How did things go, right? Who did their jobs? Who didn't do their jobs? How do we improve our processes overall? Even if everyone did a great job, how do we get better? How do we look at things? What do you want to start doing? What do you want to stop doing? What do you want to continue doing? So it's really, there's so many different ways to do that kind of conversation, but you really, it's just a check-in to make sure that you are achieving what you want to achieve in the most effective and efficient way possible. And again, in the very beginning, those are going to be extremely, extremely important as you're trying to iterate and build up your team to be more effective and more efficient. Now, iteration is the key to Agile. And if you don't take that time to do a retrospective and look back on what worked well and what didn't, then you're not really going to be doing Agile very well. That's another problem that people run into. They don't take the time to actually do the rituals the way that you're supposed to do them. And that's why you'll see a lot of failures. If you take a step back, the second most common reason that Agile fails, actually probably the most common reason Agile fails in an organization, is that the sponsors or the leadership, the people who are saying, let's implement Agile, let's make this work, are not really engaged, or they're too engaged. So it's kind of where they fit in this whole spectrum. They want to be engaged enough to empower the leader or the leaders, the product owners, the folks who are doing the work and working with the teams. They want to empower them to do the work that they can do. They were hired to do a job. They need to be empowered to do that. And that includes accountability, holding everyone on the team accountable. That includes being able to say to them, hey, we need you to do this work. Otherwise, there are going to be repercussions, and we have to go back to your supervisors and let them know that things are not working the way they want to work. And they need to be empowered to say, hey, look, we can't take on this many tasks in one sprint. We'll move that to the next sprint and really allocate work effectively. Now, if any of these things is not the case, if the leadership or the sponsors of the project or the Agile team are basically saying we're going to reserve our power for ourselves, and the leaders, the team, are not going to be able to do things without our approval, they're hindering the entire Agile process. And that's, again, another fragile system. It's not Agile. You can't be Agile if you have to check with the leadership on every decision you have to make. And that handcuffs the leaders of the team. If they can't hold people accountable on the team that they're not doing what they're supposed to do, again, that handcuffs the team. So you want to make sure that the leaders of the Agile group are empowered to make decisions, allocate work, and to hold people accountable for what they need to do. Otherwise, you will be held back and things are not going to work the way you want them to work. The next thing I want to talk about is a culture shift, right? Whenever you're implementing a new policy across any kind of organization, there's going to be pushback, there's going to be culture considerations, and you want to make sure that you are taking those into account in any kind of conversations you're having with those people. That's the case with Agile, like with anything else. But it's a huge culture shift, because not only are the people on top involved in that culture shift and that perspective shift, but the people who are actually doing the work, the team members, are actually involved every single day with the other team members in the Agile team. And so you want to make sure that they are all bought into this process. And some of them are not going to be used to it. Some of them are not going to know what this Agile thing is. Some of them are going to be questioning whether they should just go back to waterfall or why we're even making the switch at all. So it's very, very important that you orient the team and make sure that the dynamics of the team are such that they can move forward with an Agile project. If you have someone or multiple people on the team who are so constrained by the idea that only waterfall works, or they only work a certain way, then that's time to switch those people out for someone else. You need to be able to have people on the team who are going to contribute and who are going to be part of the Agile process, not hinder it. The third thing I want to talk about is resourcing. Now, when you approach a client or someone to talk about Agile, it's kind of daunting to say we want to bring on people or have people in the organization do this work full time, right? Because an Agile team is a full-time team. If you don't have a team dedicated, everyone on that team dedicated to be full-time, except for the resources you only have here and there, that kind of thing, once in a while, that's fine if they're not full-time, but the core team needs to be full-time. And the reason for that is because you want to be able to allocate work consistently every single sprint. If you can't allocate that work consistently across the board, you can't really have any predictability in terms of what kind of work you can get done. And that makes it impossible to plan work out. It makes it also extremely difficult for you to say, hey, we can get this project done by 6 months from now, as opposed to this person's available only 3 hours a week. We're not even sure which 3 hours those are going to be. We got to factor in vacation time. We got to factor in other team dynamics. When are they available versus when's that person available? What support do they need? And it just gets really, really unruly. You can see how that can get out of hand very quickly. So that's why you want an Agile team to be full-time and to work with each other on a regular basis. That serves a couple different purposes. One is what I just talked about, predictability of schedule and bandwidth. The second is going to be just team dynamics, cohesion. You want the team to work together and get used to working together so well that they can kind of work off each other, right? It becomes almost fun to work together because you're creating something from scratch that didn't exist before. And now you know that team works together really, really well. And every sprint, every retrospective, that team gets better and better and better together. If you keep switching people out, having people come here for a couple hours there, a couple hours there, it's really tough to build that kind of dynamic, that kind of cohesion within the team. And it's also really, really difficult for that team to feel confident that the people in the rest of the team are able and committed to the same outcomes that they are. So be really mindful of that as you're looking to create your Agile team, and make sure that they are allocated effectively full time to that kind of to that effort, to that team. Next, I want to talk about the external dynamics. This is something that people don't tend to factor in as much, but it really does matter. The team itself is one consideration, absolutely. But the team doesn't work in a vacuum, all right? For a lot of it, the team's going to be working just with the team and trying to make sure that things work within the dynamics of the team and within the confines of the team. That's fine. But the project sponsors are still external. The people, managers of those people in the Agile team are also external to that team. So we want to make sure that there's not any kind of bad blood, any kind of politics, or any kind of policies, for that matter, that hold people back from working together. I've seen so many times where there's silos between the cross-functional team outside of the Agile team itself that affect the Agile team as it works. And this is really easy to pinpoint because you're looking at people and they're not really being open. They're not sharing what's going on. They're not talking about challenges that they're having within their departments. Those are things that need to come up. And it's not about politics. It's not about egos. It's about the team functioning and the team being able to deliver on time and delivering quality on time, for that matter. So you have to be able to have those kind of open, trusting conversations. And it takes vulnerability on both the individual and on the team and on the department level. So you want to be able to make sure that everyone outside the team, all the different stakeholders, so project sponsors, department heads, people that are managing the people on the Agile teams, they all have to be bought in as well. And they have to understand that if there's an issue on the team with someone on their staff, they have to be notified about it. You have to be able to, you being the project leader or whoever's in the place of being that leader, has to be able to report to those people and say, hey, listen, this guy he's been great for 6 months, but suddenly there's been a drop in productivity. What's going on here? How do we do this? Or a more normal situation, this guy's going to be on vacation for 2 weeks. We have a sprint that we need to get done. Who can you give us from your team to make up for that time? Because we need someone to fill that gap. And those are conversations that need to happen. And you need to be able to understand that. That goes back to a couple different things I talked about already as well, which is like predictability. Knowing that person's on vacation, if they're only allocated for 10 hours a week, and you don't know what 10 hours those are, having someone else step in for those weird 10 hours, you don't even know what the meetings are going to look like. So you got to be really careful with those kind of things. The last thing I want to say is that as you're doing any kind of Agile implementation, it's, like I said, it's going to be a huge culture shift, but you want to make sure that the business team or the client team, so to speak, is as involved as the project team, the people who are actually doing the work. Whether I'm trying to apply this across the board, not just in software development, but across the board in business settings or whatever other settings you might be applying this to. But as you're applying Agile and working with an Agile team, you want to make sure that all the stakeholders, including the client side, are engaged. You have someone who's at least familiar with the client enough that they can be that product owner and speak on behalf of the client, or the client provides a product owner to you to work with the teams and make sure that they're empowered to do what they need to do. There's a couple different dynamics at play there, and you want to make sure that every role and every responsibility is as clearly defined as possible. So all the swim lanes are clear, all the roles and responsibilities are clear, every leadership position on the Agile team is taken up and filled by someone who's competent and capable of doing what they're doing. And you want to make sure that the teams all trust each other. So it's not out of the question to do some kind of team building or some kind of activities outside of the normal workday to make sure that the team cohesion is at maximum efficiency possible. That's something you want to do on a regular basis. And that's kind of the intangible that you can't really look at in terms of saying, oh, that person's great on paper or not. You can have an amazing, amazing developer or an amazing, amazing subject matter expert, but they just might not be great at interacting with other people. Or they may take time to build that trust with whoever they're working with. So you want to take that into account as you're doing whatever you're doing, as you're planning your work and planning out your Agile team. Agile teams are really, really powerful and can do amazing work if they're implemented properly. You want to make sure that you're looking at the things I mentioned before to make sure that everything is in place to make that Agile team successful. If it's not, then make sure that you're talking to the project sponsors, make sure that letting them know what's going on, be as vocal as you need to be to get that stuff done. Because if not, that team's not going to be efficient. People on the team are going to be demotivated, frustrated, wondering why they made the shift from waterfall to Agile, because in their minds, waterfall may have worked really well. And at the end of the day, you're not going to finish things on time or well, or both. And so you want to make sure you're doing the best you can to get these things on board as much as possible. Now, is there really a pure implementation of Agile in the world? Probably a couple here and there. Everything's kind of a little bit of a, kind of a customized implementation of Agile. But that being said, there are key components of Agile that I mentioned here just now. And those key components, no matter what you do outside of those things, must be in place in order to have a successful Agile implementation. So this is kind of a dry topic a little bit, but anyone who's been in Agile and involved in Agile conversation knows that this is actually not dry at all. It's actually really, really complicated and really interesting and kind of fun, honestly, to implement. So Agile projects can be really, really cool and be really effective in terms of how you get things done. Just make sure you're doing it properly. Anyone with any questions or comments about their teams, how do your teams work? If anything I mentioned, if there's any additional considerations that you want to throw in there, please feel free to mention them in the comment section below. And I'd be happy to talk about them in a future video or address any comments or questions you guys might have. Thanks again. Take care all. Stay safe. Have a great week. And I will see you guys on Thursday. Take care.